It's beautiful to be here, even though it's a difficult lineup. The question most of you have been asked yourself, certainly, why is Prague so stunningly beautiful? Not only this conference, why is Prague so beautiful? And history books have a few stories to tell us, stories that go like that. There was this Rudolf II guy, Austrian emperor, of course, who preferred Prague to Vienna. And he was not really a hodler, but he was a hoarder. And you'll see the difference soon. He was a terrible hoarder, but he hoarded one of the largest collections in the world. And more importantly, he hoarded people. And about the time that he was here hoarding people, Prague was one of the centers of arts and sciences, as today it's one of the centers of Bitcoin. If you hoard people, if you attract lots of people, you have network effects, people run into each other. So the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe could run into Austrian astronomer Johannes Kepler, and both they could complete the Copernican revolution in astronomy, so something really important. But that, of course, is textbook history, and I'll tell you the real history now. The real history is that the Rudolf II guy actually was a kind of man-child, a soy boy, as you say nowadays. He was all-powerful, but he didn't want to bear any responsibility for that power. See, he was basically clueless. He hoarded lots of crazy stuff like bezoars. No one knows what's that anymore. It's gallstones taken from the guts of animals because he thought they had some magical properties. How was he able to hoard still that many interesting people and interesting artifacts? And of course, the main reason is he was not an explorer. He was not discovering these things, these treasures out there in the world and bringing them here. He had to offer something. And he had to offer something just as hoardable, but more fungible than the stuff he wanted to attract to Prague. And what's more fungible? Of course, that's money. So it's no accident that the Bohemian groszy here, silver coins, were very popular around the world, hugely popular in Italy, for example, among the merchants for their stability and their fineness. And here is the real reason why Prague was the center of the world for a while. I put on this map all the important silver mines and mints of the medieval ages. And you see, Prague is right in the center, a monetary hub. But the problem with mines and mints, of course, is that they are immobile. They can be controlled by the stationary bandits like Rudolf II, who try to control on the silver. But sooner or later, they run out of this stuff. And they run out of it for two reasons. Because they don't produce value, so they are consuming value. So all the silver went to the east, where you got the luxury goods from to consume. But a second more important reason is that silver also is immensely hoardable. So over time, even though you are able to control the mints and you control the flow, a private stock of hoarded wealth emerges, and it's hidden in plain sight. And the interesting thing, right before Prague had its renaissance, the history books tell us about a silver famine. And of course, that's what historians and economists always do. If you run out of money, you blame money. There wasn't suddenly enough money. Of course, it was hidden in plain sight by private hoards. And those are two crucial aspects of money and a monetary network. It's concealable and it's easy to smuggle. And of course, one form of money was even easier to smuggle due to its higher purchasing power. And that's a real gold standard, not a thing that happened afterwards. That's the florin guilder gold standard. And interestingly, it's not a coin that's always minted. It's a standard. And where does the standard come from? It's merchants realizing that it's better not to trust, but to verify. So you set your monetary standard in a way that you don't have to trust what's printed on the coin. You define it in the fineness and weight of the precious metal there. So it's private hoards like these of smuggable and hoardable monetary assets that constitute the amazing network of trade that already emerges in the early medieval ages, and then of course is behind the wealth concentrated at the nodes of this immense network. Let's look at the European network. The important thing about a network is you can reroute in a network. So if people are getting crazy in Vienna, getting more interventionist, you bypass Vienna, you achieve the same result, you go through Prague, and you just reroute the network. And the network, of course, is not just roads. The old question, who builds the roads? It's mainly the bridges, but the question, who builds the bridges, is a quite stupid one. It's not the bridges and the roads. If you have 2 points, and at both of these points there is private wealth, then you'll have a trade flow. And then, of course, if you have wealth wanting to attract, wanting to exchange, wanting to cooperate, you'll find a way. And what was the way? We really had an emergence of bridge building then in the medieval ages in Central Europe. And the bridges were built by a system called pontage. It's just a fee that you pay, and you don't even have to pay it every time you go on it. It's just the merchants on one node and the merchants at the other nodes cooperate and provide the funds to build the bridges. So those bridges are not bridges of brick and mortar. They are monetary bridges. They are bridging wealth. They are mobile bridges. They are replaceable, substitutable bridges, bridges that can be rerouted, and they only make sense in a global network. And so it's no surprise that the first modern globe was built by someone called Martin from Bohemia. This Martin from Bohemia was a German. His father already lived in Venice, but it tells you this idea of nationality is something very recent. We had German, Italian, and Czech merchants and craftsmen meeting at nodes like Prague at the time and being part of a minority that was very cosmopolitan, globe-trotting, pioneering, discovering people. Why did German merchants play such a role? Let's have a look at the card. It's not for some inherent quality of the Germans. Maybe it's even a negative quality. There was lots of plundering in German lands. But if you have enough plunderers, there can be a stalemate between plunderers. Now look, that's the beautiful medieval Europe, a decentralized landscape of different, of course, plunderers in a certain stalemate. And if you survive this kind of decentralized setting, you just don't care as a merchant, because if one door closes, one bridge is shut down, you open up another bridge if there is enough attraction between wealth. So we may call that the honey badger effect of merchants, and that's one of the reasons why the merchants became more and more pioneering, more and more risk-friendly, able to bear uncertainty, why we have mining entrepreneurs coming from the German lands to Bohemia, developing these early mines, why we have Italian mining entrepreneurs operating there and craftsmen moving around the place. So it's not just a network of wealth, that's misunderstood. It's linking people, it's connecting people, and German philosophy had that stupid idea. It's like it's either wealth or culture, because you got to take away the wealth to then spend on culture, and that's a real German thing to do. Absolutely crazy. If we look at the most famous German philosopher, for example, Immanuel Kant, it's no accident that he is from Königsberg, because Königsberg was the node in the network bringing Baltic wood to England and Scotland for the ships. And that, of course, brought English and Scottish Enlightenment ideas exactly to Königsberg. So it's no accident at all that Kant is then the famous Enlightenment philosopher. Who's the most famous Austrian philosopher? Wittgenstein. Interestingly, Wittgenstein is the son of a steel entrepreneur operating in Bohemia. Right there, again, you see the importance of monetary bridges, linking people, linking ideas between people. And of course, there is one tradition I'm very fond of, which is best understood as a renaissance emerging out of a network of monetary bridges. And if we look here at the life cycle, more or less, or the life trajectory of course you recognize him, I hope. It's Karl Menger brought to life, the founder of the Austrian School of Economics. And of course, Austrian is only to be understood in a very medieval sense, in a very European sense. It's just moving between nodes, where Vienna is one of the nodes, and then becoming an increasingly important hub. But we may as well call it a Prague School of Economics, or a Krakow School of Economics, or a Lemberg, Lviv School of Economics, as Ludwig von Mises, the most important monetary theorist, originally from Lviv, and Karl Menger spent time there, actually as an entrepreneur, as a media entrepreneur. That was his main background. So again, a lot of this linkage between entrepreneurial wealth and cultural renaissance. So if we try to sum up some of the lessons of this kind of monetary infrastructure of the past that's underrated for its network effects, underrated for how it bridged ideas and people, we see there are quite a few things that seem to be oddly similar to the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin infrastructure. So I try to make some kind of promising, optimistic prophecy. It could as well be that after Bitcoin Prague and Prague becoming the center for a while of this Bitcoin infrastructure, that the history books in 100 years from now will then write about, after this event, the terrible Bitcoin famine of the early 21st century happened, and showed how flawed Bitcoin was. But then suddenly we have no idea why a new European renaissance of the arts, the sciences, general well-being emerged, where Prague, of course, is not the center of a nation state capturing it all, but maybe one of the most important nodes in that kind of network effect. So even if historians mostly don't understand what's happening, the concealed history brings us forward. And I think we can look into the future in a quite optimistic way. If you want to discuss some more of that, if you want to get some signed books, meet me right away at the consensus booth at the Expo Hall. Thanks a lot for paying attention.